The share price today has taken a massive knock, and that is why it's now no longer just a private matter. And when it blew up in the courts and all the dirty laundry, private and personal dirty laundry started being aired, it started to raise questions, I guess, amongst some of the biggest investors about, well, do we need to be involved in a company where the major shareholder and the chief executive is involved in this kind of stuff? How much of his attention is being diverted by this extra activity, and how much of his time is being diverted to actually running the company? So those sort of questions, really pop up amongst the major shareholders and other people within the company itself. So it's a major diversion, and now we're seeing the impact.
Not the sort of questions you want asked as a CEO. Maybe if you don't mind, talk us through what we know so far about the case and what's been alleged.
Well, the case, I guess, blew up when it landed in court, and a woman that Mr. White had a relationship with essentially tried to garnish his a bank account that he had for about $92,000. And that was apparently or allegedly over furniture that she'd bought for a house that he apparently had bought for her to live in. The relationship, for whatever reason, well, we do know some of the reasons, but we won't go into them now. The relationship broke down. She never moved into the house. She was stuck with the furniture that she'd paid all this money for, so she tried to get the money back. And she succeeded in garnishing his wages. He then launched legal action to recover that money as a debt and bankrupt her in the process. Hence, it's hit the newspapers, and it's all over the airwaves.
And what key issues does this raise around governance?
Well, again, how much of this, is associated with Mr. White's running of the company? How much time is diverted from this? Of course, what's happened since then is that other women have come out and essentially said that they've had similar kind of experiences with Mr. White. There have been all sorts of names, in the newspapers and on radio and television about, claiming about his behaviour. And so this is all now starting to reflect on the company. And bear in mind too, a lot of the big shareholders are major superannuation funds, industry funds. They do tend to, they abide by a strict rule of conduct, and they insist that the companies in which they invest, the people running those companies, are above board. And so this is a major not just a diversion, it's the kind of thing they do not want to be involved with.
And another major shareholder is, of course, Richard White himself. How challenging is this for the board that's trying to limit the growing fallout?
Well, this is one of the major problems. I mean, he owns around 1/3 of the company. So he's not just an ordinary chief executive who's been appointed by the board and could be summarily dismissed if he'd brought the company into disrepute, which some people now argue is the case. Because he started the company, he's driven its expansion, he owns 1/3 of the shares, he really does control the company. And so there is an element there that he is beyond reproach when it comes to these kind of matters. And there are people who argue that if he was just an ordinary chief executive who'd been recruited and appointed to the role, that he probably would have been either forced to stand aside at the moment while this plays out in the courts, or at least, or possibly even step down from his role. That is the complicating factor here, and that's where the governance issues really, I guess, tend to play a role here. And it is one of the major difficulties when you have a family-dominated company or a company that is controlled by one shareholder. How much of it is being run for the purposes of the investors? How much of it is being run for the benefit of the executives?
And if the board does opt to remove him, what future does WiseTech have?
Well, I'm not sure that the board can remove him. I mean, he is the biggest shareholder. I mean, they can, I guess, vote to get rid of him. He could probably then just change the board, really, couldn't he? Because he owns 30% of the company. He controls the company. The future of the company really does, I guess, rest with him. He is, one of the prime movers behind the technology itself. And certainly he's been the major dominating force when it comes to its expansion. So it wouldn't be the same company if he did step aside.
Are there any lessons here for other CEOs in what's a really clear example of how societal expectations around what is acceptable behaviour from a CEO of a publicly listed company have changed?
I think that's a really important point because, a politician who behaved in this manner would probably be forced to step aside. And those same kinds of norms are now being applied to the corporate world. And, this is a complicating factor here that he is the major shareholder and he's the dominant force within the company. So he's kind of a force unto his own when it comes to WiseTech. Just as the Packers were when they ran media companies, just as the Murdochs are in their realm. And this is a complicating factor for any investor that tries to get involved in these kind of companies. And once you do so with the knowledge that this is the way it works. But those new laws, or those new norms, as you put it, are extended to the corporate world, and particularly given we have so much superannuation money invested in here. People are expected to behave in a fit and proper manner to the position that they hold.
Ian Verrender, thank you.
Thanks, Nadia.